To the world, billionaire Adekunle Vaughn was untouchable. Steel companies across West Africa, private jets that never waited on runways, boardrooms that fell silent when he entered. His tailored suits hid a disciplined body. His composed expression suggested a man who had conquered chaos and bent life to his will. People admired him, some feared him, many envied him. No one truly knew him. Every night, when the mansion lights dimmed and the security gates sealed him off from the world, Adekunle faced a truth no amount of money could erase. His body betrayed him in the quiet. The strength that once defined his masculinity, effortless, unquestioned, had abandoned him like a loyal friend who left without explanation. Doctors were polite, clinical. Stress, they said, adjusting their glasses. Work-life imbalance. Age. Friends laughed it off during golf games and private dinners. Ade, you've earned rest. You're not a boy anymore. But alone in his bedroom, staring at the ceiling that reflected nothing but wealth, Adekunle called it shame. It was not just the physical failure that tormented him. It was what it symbolized: loss of control, vulnerability, the terrifying realization that power had limits and that some battles could not be won with money, influence, or intimidation. Women came and went, models, executives, socialites who smiled too brightly and touched him too carefully as if afraid of cracking glass. They admired his success, his generosity, his name. None of them awakened anything within him, not beauty, not luxury, not desire. Eventually, he stopped trying. He buried himself deeper in work, in acquisitions and negotiations, in endless flights that crossed time zones but never touched his emptiness. His mansion became a hotel, staffed by people who did their jobs efficiently and spoke only when spoken to. Then one morning, the house manager introduced a new maid. "This is Zainab, sir. She will be assisting on the east wing." Adekunle barely looked up from his tablet. "Fine." Zainab nodded quietly, eyes lowered, hands clasped in front of her apron. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but steady. "Good morning, sir." There was nothing extraordinary about her at first glance. She was not dressed to impress. Her movements were careful, almost restrained. Yet something about her presence unsettled him, not in an alarming way, but in a subtle, unfamiliar one. She moved through the house like someone who did not want to disturb the air. Over the next few days, Adekunle noticed small things. Zainab never rushed, yet she was always on time. She listened more than she spoke. When corrected, she accepted it without resentment. When thanked, she smiled briefly, as if unaccustomed to kindness. And there was sadness in her eyes. Not loud sadness, not the kind that demanded attention. The quiet kind, the kind people carry after life has already broken them once. It was familiar. One afternoon, Adekunle worked from home, reviewing contracts in the living room. Zainab entered silently to dust the shelves. He watched her reflection in the glass without realizing it. She hummed under her breath, soft, almost unconscious. "Where are you from?" he asked suddenly. She startled slightly, then answered respectfully. "Kwara State, sir." "Why Lagos?" She hesitated, not long enough to seem rude, but long enough to reveal thought. "Opportunity," she said finally. He nodded. He understood that word better than most. As days turned into weeks, Adekunle found himself anticipating her presence. Not for conversation, not for attention, but for the calm that followed her into a room. His chest felt lighter when she was near. His breathing slowed. For the first time in years, his body responded, not with desire, but with ease. It disturbed him. One evening, during a heavy rainstorm that drowned the city in thunder, Adekunle sat alone in the dark living room. Zainab brought him tea without being asked. "You can go," he said. She paused. "Sir, are you all right?" No one had asked him that in years. The words broke something open. He laughed quietly, bitterly. "Do I look like a man who is all right?" Zainab did not answer immediately. She did not offer advice or pity. She simply stayed. In that silence, Adekunle felt something shift. Not a miracle, not a sudden cure, but the fragile beginning of honesty. For the first time, he realized what had truly been missing. Not passion, not use, but connection. And Zainab, with her quiet strength and familiar pain, had unknowingly unlocked the door he had sealed shut for far too long. Zainab never flirted, never tried to impress him. She simply existed, gentle, respectful, real. In a house where everything glittered with intention, her presence felt accidental, almost human. She did not linger in doorways or lower her voice to sound sweet. She did not ask personal questions or look at him as if his wealth were a favor she hoped to earn. She greeted him each morning with the same quiet courtesy, eyes steady, posture composed, as though dignity were something she carried inside her, not something granted by circumstance. She brought his meals and asked nothing. No complaints about portions, no indirect hints about salary advances or favors. She placed the tray down carefully, ensuring the cutlery aligned just so, then stepped back as if his space were sacred. Sometimes she reminded him gently to eat while the food was still warm. Sometimes she said nothing at all. She cleaned his house like someone grateful for peace, not money. Adekunle noticed that first. The way she wiped surfaces slowly, thoroughly, not as a performance but as a ritual. The way she opened curtains to let light in, as if the house itself needed air. The way she paused to straighten a framed photograph that had been crooked for years, then moved on without comment. She treated the mansion less like a workplace and more like a borrowed sanctuary. At first, Adekunle dismissed his growing awareness of her as boredom. He had spent too many years surrounded by noise, meetings, negotiations, voices competing for his approval. Silence felt loud now. Zainab's quietness filled that silence, and his mind, unused to rest, latched onto it. But it became harder to ignore. He noticed how she never rushed, yet somehow always finished on time. How she listened fully when spoken to, not with fear, not with eagerness, but with attention. How she did not shrink in his presence, yet did not challenge him either. There was balance in her, and it unsettled him. One evening, Adekunle sat alone in the living room, documents spread across the glass table, unread. The house was unusually still. Zainab entered to collect empty cups. She moved with her usual quiet efficiency, but when she spoke, it caught him off guard. "Sir," she said softly, "the storm will be heavy tonight. You may want to close the balcony doors." That was all. Yet when she spoke to him, not at him, not through rehearsed respect, but to him, his chest tightened. His breath changed. It was subtle but undeniable. A tightening just beneath his ribs, a warmth he had not felt in years. Not desire. Recognition. It felt like something inside him had paused, looked up, and realized it was no longer alone. He stared at her longer than necessary, trying to understand the sensation. His body reacted not with urgency, not with hunger, but with calm. A deep, unfamiliar calm that spread through him like warmth after a long illness. For the first time in years, his body responded, not to lust but to emotional safety. And it terrified him. Adekunle had built his life on control. Safety, to him, had always meant power, owning the room, commanding respect, never revealing weakness. Emotional safety required surrender. It required trust, and trust was something he had learned painfully to avoid. That night, long after Zainab retired to her quarters, Adekunle lay awake, replaying the moment. Her tone, her distance, the fact that she had expected nothing from him, not even acknowledgement. He realized then how exhausting it had been to always be needed, desired, demanded from. Women had wanted his money, his status, his protection. Colleagues wanted his approval. Family wanted his solutions. Zainab wanted nothing. That absence of expectation created space, and in that space, something wounded and forgotten inside him stirred. Days passed, and the feeling did not fade. If anything, it grew quieter and deeper. Adekunle found himself listening for her footsteps, noticing when she was absent. When she spoke, he felt present in his own body again, grounded in a way that had nothing to do with performance or masculinity. He hated how much it mattered. One evening, he asked her to sit, not as an order, but as a request. She hesitated, then obeyed, perching carefully on the edge of the chair across from him. "You work very hard," he said. She nodded once. "Thank you, sir." No smile, no false modesty, just acknowledgement. "Do you like it here?" he asked. Zainab considered the question carefully. "It is peaceful," she said. "That matters to me." Something in her answer struck him deeply. Not ambition, not escape, peace. Adekunle realized then that what had awakened in him was not a physical response, but a memory of himself, of the man he had been before power hardened him, before life taught him to armor every feeling. Zainab did not awaken his body. She awakened his capacity to feel safe enough to exist without performing. And that, more than anything else, frightened him, because it meant healing was possible, and healing required facing everything he had buried. Still, he said nothing. He only sat there, breathing steadily, as the silence between them held something fragile, honest, and alive. The truth came out one rainy night. Rain battered the tall glass windows of the mansion, streaking the outside world into blurred lines of silver and shadow. Thunder rolled low and distant, the kind that pressed against the chest rather than startled the ears. Adekunle sat in the living room with only one lamp on, the rest of the house swallowed by darkness. For once, he had sent everyone away, except Zainab. She had brought him tea earlier and was about to leave when he spoke, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Stay," he said, not as a command, as a request. Zainab hesitated, then sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. The rain filled the silence for a long moment. Adekunle stared at his hands, strong hands that had signed billionaire deals, hands that no longer felt powerful when it mattered most. "I am not the man people think I am," he said finally. Zainab said nothing. She did not rush him. She did not interrupt. She simply listened. Adekunle swallowed. "I have failed," he continued. "Not in business, not in money, but as a man." His voice broke slightly on the last word, and he hated himself for it. "I am empty. I cannot feel the way I used to. I cannot respond. Doctors explain it away, but they don't live inside this body. They don't wake up with this silence." He laughed softly, without humor. "Do you know what it is like to have the world kneel before you, while your own body refuses you?" Zainab looked at him then, not with shock, not with curiosity, but with recognition. The same quiet recognition he had felt the first day she spoke to him. "You are not broken," she said gently. Something in her tone undid him. Adekunle shook his head. "You don't understand. I have tried everything. Money, women, distraction, nothing works." She leaned forward slightly. "I understand more than you think." And then, slowly, she shared her own truth. She spoke of a love that had promised safety and delivered betrayal, of trusting someone with her future only to be discarded when she became inconvenient, of losing not just a relationship but her sense of worth, of nights when her body went numb, not from illness but from fear and grief, of surviving not because she was strong but because she had no other choice. "I did not feel like a woman for a long time," she admitted quietly. "I felt invisible, unwanted, ashamed of something I did not cause." Adekunle listened, stunned. He had never considered that pain could wear so many faces, that powerlessness could live in a woman as surely as it lived in him. The rain softened outside, becoming a steady whisper. They sat there, two wounded people stripped of titles and roles, bound only by honesty. In that shared silence, something ancient awakened. Not hunger, not urgency, but life. Adekunle felt it first as warmth, low, steady, spreading through him. His breathing deepened. His shoulders relaxed. For the first time in years, he did not feel like he was bracing against himself. His manhood did not rise because of her body. It rose because his soul finally felt seen. Not fixed, not cured, seen. Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. He turned away, embarrassed, but Zainab did not look away from him. "Thank you for trusting me," she said simply. Nothing happened after that night the way stories usually promise. There was no sudden transformation, no dramatic crossing of lines. They did not touch. They did not confess love. Zainab returned to her duties. Adekunle returned to his work. But something had shifted. Adekunle began therapy, real therapy, not discreet consultations meant to preserve image. He slept better. He ate better. He allowed himself to feel frustrated without turning it into anger. Progress was slow, uneven, real. Zainab eventually gave notice. She had found a small job opportunity out of the city. When she told him, Adekunle felt the familiar tightening in his chest, but this time it was gratitude, not fear. On her last day, he thanked her, not with money alone, but with words. "You reminded me that I am human," he said. "That mattered more than you know." Zainab smiled, a full smile this time. "We all just need to be seen," she replied. After she left, the house felt quieter, but not emptier. Adekunle stood by the window as rain began to fall again, softer now, kinder. He was not healed completely, but he was healing. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from passion. It doesn't come from force or performance or desire. Sometimes, it comes from connection and the courage to finally tell the truth.